The TF2 Summer update is finally here. The holiday-sized update we've all been waiting for. What did it bring with it? Well, about what was promised, which is to be expected. But naturally, this is Valve we're talking about, so there have been some issues. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Summer update. For starters, the good. And when I say good, I mean really, really good. Like, oh my god, these Warpaints are amazing. This update released with a Warpaint case, our first summer one ever, and it is seriously the best Warpaint case we've gotten since winter 2017. And that's not a small compliment if you've seen my video on that case. Does it have it beat out? Maybe. I don't think there's a single truly bad Warpaint in this case. There's some that are better than others, but for the most part, this is a series of winners that, even if they don't look good on everything, at least look good on something. I think that Bomb Carrier and Pacific Peacemaker are the weakest, and Secretly Serviced and Business Class are the best ones. I do think this case went a bit too far in having monochromatic gray on black Warpaints, but they all look good, so as far as I'm concerned, for people who want a black and gray Warpaint, they can choose whichever one fits their preference on the weapon they want the best. As long as we don't get too many more of these in future updates like we have for fucking Christmas wrapping paper or candy corn, then I'm gonna call this a good addition. Also, every time I've done a workshop review and expressed serious interest in an item I really liked, it's gotten into the game. This happened with Rocco, Sunriser, and now Secretly Serviced. I sincerely doubt that someone at Valve is actually watching my stuff to see what I like, but it feels that way. So if you are, I appreciate that. Next, cosmetics. Overall, these are pretty good. There's only a couple that I would call duds, and 2 of them are unfortunately for Demo Man. Sorry, Demo Mains. Unless you like these, then have at them. I'm also not the biggest fan of the Cranium Cooler, but it's far from the most offensive item in the game. Everything else I think is either okay or else pretty damn good. I like the Spy Hat that's literally just the Liquidator's lid, but for Spy. I've got to get that one in Terawatt now to match my Sniper Unusual. The new Heavy and Scout sets are good, this Sniper one is pretty neat. Soldier has a cool Solid Snake getup. Not to mention new Archer Sniper cosmetic, and probably my favorite of the bunch, they added the Avatar The Last Airbender Pyro Helmet. I am so happy about that. Oh yeah, also Sniper is sexy now. Well, sexier. Up next, bug fixes. Thank God. No more botting to lock people out of upgrades in MVM. I know someone who will be very excited to hear that. Steel was given a lot of fixes, including a rather infamous one on the A point, which I'm very happy to see gone now, and plenty of smaller ones, but to be honest, not as many as I thought there would be. Community-made fixes were advertised as a significant part of the update, and yet this list of fixes feels quite small. Not insignificant, but I was hoping for a bit more. There's still a possibility that we'll be seeing a lot of fixes roll out with future updates, maybe even sometime before Halloween and Smithsmas, but we'll have to wait and see. For now, this is my biggest disappointment with the update. How about taunts? Yeah, those are good too. You have your standard emote taunts, Heavy finally has a vehicle taunt now, but I also really like the killer signature and the killer joke. It's nice to have some quick snappy taunts to use after a good or funny kill, instead of just something that functions more as a time waster in the pre-round. I consider this a good batch. Now then, how about unusual effects? Nah, they're okay. I always kind of get the feeling that we've seen the best that unusual effects have to offer in the past, and this update isn't really changing my mind on that. I mean, I am biased towards the unusual fish taunt, and the unusual jellyfish hat for obvious reasons, but that's about all that sticks out to me. Okay, the lava lamp taunt is fun too. Other than that, it either feels like stuff we've seen before, or else just nothing I'd really want on a hat. It's not offensively bad for the most part, but not amazing either. But this is an area I don't feel too passionately about to begin with. I'm just not much of an unusual guy. But that's enough of all the cosmetic stuff. There is a big reason there was such a massive hubbub for this update, and that is the inclusion of not just 14 new maps, but also the introduction of a brand new game mode with the official inclusion of Versus Saxton Hale. So let's check it out. Oh. Well, I'll let you know when it works. Yeah, the maps are still as buggy as shit. Playtesting is clearly not one of Valve's strong suits. Winter 2021 was enough of a kick in the teeth to get them to start adding better looking cosmetics for the most part, but yeah, maps are still something of a weakness for them, at least in terms of bugs. Versus Saxton Hale is literally unplayable on launch and casual, so I cannot comment on it at all. VSH has never been my favorite game mode anyway, so I have no idea how much I'll even like the implementation, but that's apparently for the future. Okay, so for the time being, let's adjust that number to 10 maps. That's still a good number. That's more than I was expecting. So, how are they? Well, let's go over them one by one. Keep in mind, these are just my first impressions of the maps that may well change over time the more I play on them. Hardwood seems like a pretty great 3-point attack defend map. It reminds me of a summer version of Altitude, with a second point that's a lot less of a pain in the ass to cap. There's plenty of different routes you can go down to attack from several different angles, and it's just a very pleasant map to look at as well. This one's a really solid addition. Phoenix is a mixed bag. It's a downright gorgeous payload map that has amazing looking rock faces with great use of color, and it flows nicely. But some areas are in need of a bit of polish, and most importantly, the last point is a nightmare. Defense has a massive high ground advantage. It is practically a goddamn fortress. And there's this walkway here that can house multiple sentries, which are completely impervious to any damage from any point of safety, meaning you have to coordinate the destruction of the enemy sentries with a push up a slow, steep hill to get that final cap. And on top of all of this, you have to cross a massive sight line in order to try any of this in the first place. It's not insurmountable, but god, it makes Barn Blitz Last look like a walk in the park. And it's a shame because the rest of the map isn't half bad. I get the feeling that most people will either love or hate this one. I'm somewhere in the middle. Shark Bay is a Koth map that has some fantastic theming. It's like you're at Universal Studios waiting in the queue for a Jaws-themed attraction. Just like the others, it's another visual feast. And on the subject of feasts, I love the sharks in the bay acting as a death pit like the crocodiles in Mercenary Park. It also plays pretty well, though even by cost standards it feels a bit small, and if the teams aren't evenly balanced, which is not often the case, they can lead to some standard Koth issues where the enemy team has nowhere to walk but forward straight into your spawn. There's also this big building that acts as a sort of flank route, but it's very tight in close quarters, which can be a death sentence for certain classes if they happen to walk in at the same time as an enemy soldier, demo, or pyro. I think this creates an interesting risk-reward factor, since this building also gives you access to high ground above the point, which can give you a pretty significant advantage. Overall, it's another good map. Pelican Peak is about as good as a CTF map can be, which is to say, it's not amazing or anything, but it's more than playable. It actually doesn't seem to be as much of a stalemating mess as some of the other maps in its game mode, so if you want to play CTF to actually play CTF and not just glorified Team Deathmatch, then this is the map for you. And speaking of Team Deathmatch, Selbien is just awesome. Once again, amazing theming. So well put together with so many cool details. This is a great map to just explore on your own. And more than that, it's player destruction. Non-Halloween, non-Christmas, non-Watergate, player destruction. Thank God. The layout reminds me a lot of Cursed Cove, but with a lot of the fat trimmed. And I think that's nothing but a bonus since Cursed Cove is a pretty fun map if you ignore all the annoying Halloween shit. But the one area where fat was not trimmed is the goal for your player destruction points. The Seal. I love him. I'm very glad he's in the game now. Sulfur is actually a map that we've been running on my rebalance servers for a while now, and it's a lot like CP Steel. So if you like that map, you may like this one too. The biggest difference is that even though you can rush to cap the final point, all that does is begin to lower your team's timer since there are two separate timers running at once. If you cap all three of the other teams before capping the final point, then you end up winning instantly as soon as that final point is captured. It's a little bit out of the ordinary and might end up being confusing for some players, and for some reason, even on the rebalance server, it seems like people have a really hard time finding the C point, but overall, it's a fun map to play on. And I'm sure all of the Spymans out there will love the intricate Japanese theming. Cashworks has already garnered a reputation as being the least polished map outside of the VSH ones, with a short-lived but still very amusing bug allowing you to just walk into the enemy spawn, and even with that patched, a less than functional visual for the final point. The map itself is fine enough, though even by payload standards, the sightlines are pretty extreme, and the third point reminds me a lot of Swiftwater, in that it's kind of a pain to push through this extremely thin choke. In fact, the map reminds me a lot of Swiftwater in general, but less appealing outside of the last point, which is a lot less of a bitch to push. It's not my favorite, but I don't know if I'd uncheck it from casual yet either. We'd have to see. I still would have preferred Extinction though. Rotunda has a lot of similarities to Shark Bay in that it's decently small and has the Koth problem, where people will just run at spawn if they're doing well enough. But really, I find it has more in common with Nucleus. The enclosed point in the center with the lower ground surrounding the point and tunnels off to the side really gives me that vibe. Once again, I love it aesthetically. It's a great setting for a map and pulls it off very well. This is yet another map that's just great to walk around in and take in all the details. It's also nice to see a snowy map in the summer update, really bringing home the themeless aspect of it, which I'm all for. Reckoner is another Japanese-themed map like Sulphur. So it's interesting that we get two maps in the same update, with a view of Mount Fuji and cherry blossoms everywhere. This one is 5 CP though, and reminds me a bit of a mix of Process and Sunshine, but with cover over the middle point, which is pretty interesting. It plays pretty much the same as other 5 CP maps I've played on, which is something that people who really don't like the game mode will take issue with, but I didn't have any problems with it. I consider it another good addition. And finally, we have Venice, another payload map. This one I think is currently being seen as the bad map of the bunch, and if that's the case, then I guess this is a pretty good bundle of maps after all. Not that this map is amazing or anything. Again, Extinction would have preferred it. It's very choke heavy and once again not great on sightlines, and the heavy amount of flank routes can really disrupt an offense, which can be pretty annoying, but I don't think it's a terrible map. I'd put it in a similar camp to Phoenix, but with a less obnoxious final push that's more akin to a better Swiftwater last. At least I'd say that if my longest game on this map didn't have a Vaccinator medic on the enemy team. I hate you. And yeah, that's the summer update. Overall, I think what we did end up getting is good, but I can't help but be a little disappointed at the lack of community fixes. It was a part of the update I was looking forward to the most, and to see them sidelined is a pretty major bummer. And honestly, for what looks on the patch notes to be such a fairly minor update, this has caused the single biggest boom in the TF2 player count in history. And like, okay, I've been mostly positive and maybe lukewarm at worst in this video so far, but does this update deserve that? I mean, quality of the products received notwithstanding, yeah, this is pretty much, as advertised, a holiday-sized update. But none of the holiday-sized updates have ever gotten player counts like this, even when they had good stuff. Maybe it's just people getting really tired of the Scream Fortress and Smithmas themes for all the new content, and having a similarly sized but non-themed update is just a huge draw to people. I can understand that, especially in the areas where I'm most impressed with the update, but yeah, this is pretty standard fare for Valve's recent string of updates. On the one hand, I'm glad there's such a huge turnout for players for the game to begin with, because that's awesome, but on the other hand, I can't help but wonder if this won't encourage Valve to put more effort into future potential updates, or if they'll just realize that they can keep getting away with these bare minimum effort community updates forever, and people will continue to eat it up. I don't mean to end this video on a down note, and I probably shouldn't be thinking too far ahead into the future when we literally just got this update. I should just be enjoying what we have now, and that this is way more than we've gotten in the previous summer updates. If this is the standard for the future of summer, then I think I can live with that. But the next patch better have a war paintable Dragon's Fury, or I swear to fuck